It's Margot, bringing you another tragic story from the Cecil Hotel. So if you're ready to learn a bit more about the history of the Cecil and a remarkable man named W.K. Norton, keep watching. When the Hotel Cecil opened its doors to the public in 1927, intending to cater to business travelers and tourists, nobody could have foreseen a complete economic collapse in the very near future. The era known as the Great Depression hit in 1929 and completely changed the Cecil's clientele from that year forward. The Cecil never really bounced back, but it has endured in its various incarnations, from business travel to Skid Row to Stay on Main, and, after a brief closure, currently re-emerging as affordable housing. Many believe the Cecil to be cursed, and it's certainly clear where that assumption stems from. Shortly after opening its doors to the public, the Cecil became a destination for those intent on disappearing from the outside world, or even ending their lives. This is the sad story of the Cecil's second victim of suicide, and to my amazement, I was actually able to dig up quite a bit of family history on this one. If you've watched my other videos on the Cecil's deaths, you'll know how frustrated I am with the lack of information that survived about most of these people. So many check into the Cecil under a cloak of anonymity, and I don't think anyone should be forgotten. Everyone's story is important and interesting. So here's the very unique story of W.K. Norton. On November 14, 1931, a 46-year-old man named William Kelly Norton went missing from his home in Manhattan Beach, California, 21 miles from Los Angeles. That same day, a man checked into the Cecil Hotel under the alias of James Willis from Chicago. 5 days later, on November 19th, the guest known as James Willis was discovered deceased in his hotel room by a member of the Cecil's housekeeping staff. The subsequent investigation determined he'd only been dead for a few hours by the time his body was found. Capsules containing poison were found in Willis's vest pocket, leading to the conclusion that he'd taken his own life. Several checks made out to a Mrs. M.C. Norton, found in Willis's clothing, led to his identification as the missing William Kelly Norton. So what led up to this dismal end? W.K. Norton was born on February 23, 1885, in Maharashtra, India. His parents, Reverend Albert Norton and Mary Kelly Norton, were American non-denominational missionaries who actually made quite a name for themselves in India, dedicating their lives to the most destitute residents of the Indian community of Dand, Maharashtra, eventually setting up an orphanage for boys. This is where W.K. grew up for the most part, among the orphans and his 4 older biological brothers, Ebenezer, John Ezra, Albert, and Charles Finney. Although the family would return to the U.S. from time to time to raise money for their mission and beloved orphanage, they spent most of their time in the northeast of Bombay, now known as Mumbai, in India. On one of their returns to the U.S. in 1892, Reverend Norton took a rare break from his missionary work and ministered for a Methodist church in North Cohocton, New York. The Reverend wanted his boys to learn English in addition to their native Hindi and spend some time gaining the experience of attending Rochester, New York schools. W.K. was 7 years old at this time. By 1899, they were back in India full-time, where they established the Norton Orphanage, which still exists today as the Boys and Girls Christian Home. In 1904, at the age of 29, W.K.'s eldest brother Ebenezer, known as Eben, was killed in a tiger hunting accident. One can only imagine how this affected such a close family. W.K. was 19 years old when his family suffered this loss. It's unclear when W.K. moved back to the U.S. as an adult, but it appears he split his time between the Los Angeles area and India. W.K.'s mother, Mary, passed away in Dand, India in 1911, when her youngest son was 26 years old. Mary was 65. It's said that Mary had given all of her strength to her boys in the orphanage. And it clearly was a lot of work, because Albert remarried to a woman named Nellie Selina Andrews in 1918, who actually died just 3 years later at the age of 44, reportedly from exhaustion, while trying to help Albert with the work he and Mary had started at the orphanage and in the surrounding community. Albert Norton died on New Year's Eve in 1923 at 76 years old. To this day, the Norton name is well known and seemingly revered in that part of India, and their good works still live on. The orphanage and the Norton Memorial Christ Church, also known as the Lal Church, established in 1899 by Reverend Norton, are still in use today. The Norton family is credited with fighting tirelessly to save thousands of Indian children from famine, sickness, and abuse. Albert Norton's obituary states, although spreading the word was important to both Albert and Mary, living the word defined their lives more clearly. While Albert would take money from wherever he could find it in order to help his mission, he refused to cater to any single denomination, nor would he push any single spiritual agenda by taking a salary. Consequently, he and his family often knew the same periods of hunger as those he served. In adulthood, W.K. went on to continue his family's work in India with his wife. I haven't been able to find a record of when they were married. There does exist a 63-page pamphlet written by W.K. and his wife, Mary Courtney Norton, also known as M.C. Norton, called Instead of a Visit. This pamphlet was self-published in the early 1920s to raise funds for the Norton's Pilgrim's Mission India Fund. This mission was based out of Los Angeles, California, and Benares, India. The pamphlet contains several black and white illustrations and photos, one of which is captioned, Mr. and Mrs. W.K. Norton with our Indian baby Hope. However, I haven't been able to find any record of this child's life or death, aside from this one photo. There is also a 1920 photo book titled Photographs of the Pilgrim's Mission, Benares, India, written by Reverend and Mrs. W.K. Norton. This book is said to contain a photo of the couple and their 2 daughters, but I haven't been able to locate a copy of that photo. The photos I have seen are an extremely interesting look into the rich culture and spiritual practices the Nortons had seemingly been accepted into. The only recorded offspring of W.K. and M.C. that I've actually been able to find is a son named William Kelly Norton, Jr., who is also listed as adopted. This son would have been only 4 years old at the time of his father's suicide. Even in gathering all of this information, I've come across no explanation for W.K. Norton's decision to end his life. No scandals, marital woes, or particular financial distress, though the whole world was financially distressed at that time, so that certainly could have been a factor. It had to be something deeply personal and deeply painful. Perhaps a medical condition or a deeply buried secret. It could have even been the same exhaustion from simply giving too much of themselves to others that took the lives of his mother and stepmother. I suppose we'll never know. W.K. Norton was buried in the Inglewood Park Cemetery in Inglewood, California. I was happy to see that Mary Courtney Norton went on to continue doing charitable works around Los Angeles in the decades following her husband's death. I haven't yet come across a record of her death. I did stumble upon this Twitter post from an organization called The Glen that describes itself as a life plan community designed to support older adults as they strive to get the most out of life. They shared a group photo that included Mrs. W.K. Norton, taken in the 1960s when she'd helped to bring an Easter program and party to the Glen's residents. The Norton's son, W.K. Jr., grew up to fight in World War II and died in 2004 at the age of 76. I'm usually pretty critical of the intentions of missionaries, and this one is no exception, but the Nortons seemed to be decent people who only wanted to be of service where help was needed. As far as I can tell, while they did engage in the trendy wave of bringing the Pentecostal faith to India, in their charitable works they kept an open mind and made a concerted effort to keep their practices non-denominational and seemingly inclusive. They probably did more good than harm overall, so I give them credit for that. Since W.K.'s death, a disturbing number of suicides have plagued the Cecil for nearly a century and formed the hotel's public image, earning it the nickname of Hotel Death. My next video about the Cecil will cover some of the events that preceded the death of W.K. Norton. There were other notable happenings at the hotel that give the impression the curse may have settled in as soon as the building was erected. Of course, I still have many more stories to tell about this fascinating building. Let me know if you'd be interested in an update on the recent renovations and upcoming plans for the Cecil, since there have been a lot of changes lately. That's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this story and will come back for more. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and bring your friends, family, COVID pod, cult members, invisible friends, or enemies. And if you want to hear more about the Cecil Hotel, let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching.